I build cyber defense infrastructure for the Pentagon, monitor real-time digital threats across the globe, and write code that hunts state-sponsored hackers. But last Thursday at 7:43 p.m., I stood in my kitchen holding a spoonful of soup and staring at my smart fridge, which had just said, in a robotic voice, "Connection unstable due to unauthorized external access." I dropped the spoon, rushed to my computer, and within minutes, found the breach wasn't from China, Russia, or Iran. No. It was Karen, my next-door neighbor, streaming TV shows and syncing 6 devices off my Wi-Fi like it was a Starbucks hotspot. And she didn't even bother to hide it. Her connection name was literally Karen_Godmode. It all started a few weeks back when I noticed odd latency during my remote defense projects. My encrypted calls kept freezing, and internal Pentagon servers started reporting anomaly pings during my sessions. At first, I assumed it was just local ISP congestion or maybe a glitch in my router firmware. But when my smart assistant started randomly turning lights on and off, and my printer began spitting out empty pages in the middle of the night, I knew it wasn't some minor technical hiccup. Something was poking at my digital perimeter. And it was sloppy. I ran a passive packet inspection overnight. The next morning, I woke up to logs showing a foreign device masquerading as a trusted unit on my mesh network. Whoever it was had cloned my router ID and was siphoning bandwidth through a spoofed profile. I used triangulation tools to trace the physical signal strength, expecting to maybe find a poorly secured delivery drone or a smart speaker acting up. Instead, the signal peaked directly next door. Karen's house. Now, Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the unofficial HOA watchdog. The kind who measured your grass with a ruler and filmed teens doing skateboard tricks so she could email their parents. She had an inflatable 4th of July eagle on her lawn year-round and once accused a squirrel of menacing her wind chimes. Her porch was lined with cameras and Ring doorbells, which she swore were for safety. Translation: surveillance. Still, I wanted to be sure. So I launched a custom echo loop that would activate any connected smart speaker with a benign audio loop. The loop simply said, "This device has connected to a secure network. Unauthorized usage may result in surveillance." 5 minutes later, from Karen's porch, I heard the faint robotic voice echo my message. I didn't even have to guess. She'd connected one of her Amazon Echo devices to my signal. My script had played through her living room. Exactly 13 minutes after that, Karen stormed over with her usual righteous fury, holding her phone out like a badge. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Your internet is interfering with my home system. I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I've had enough." I stared at her, mildly impressed by her audacity. She had no idea she had just confessed. My face remained neutral. "Interfering?" I asked deadpan. "Yes." I heard a strange voice through my Alexa, and now nothing's loading. "Netflix won't work. And I have very important HOA business to conduct." "I didn't know you ran the HOA," I said, feigning ignorance. She squared her shoulders. "I don't run it officially, but someone has to maintain order." "Right. And by order, you mean streaming 8 seasons of crime documentaries on my Wi-Fi." Her face contorted. "Excuse me." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and went back inside. Let her stew. She wouldn't be stewing long. Over the next 2 days, I monitored her activity closely. She had 7 devices logged into my decoy network. Tablets, smart TVs, even a Wi-Fi connected microwave. Who in the world needed a microwave to talk to the internet? I didn't just block her access. I funneled it through a virtual bottleneck that reduced speeds to pre-2005 dial-up levels. She would still think she was connected but would struggle to load even basic pages. That evening, I saw her pacing outside like a grounded teenager. She kept rebooting her router, calling her internet provider, and yelling into her phone. At one point, I watched her point directly at my house, likely yelling some half-baked accusation. But this wasn't about bandwidth anymore. No, this was about privacy. Because what I found next made me drop my coffee. Karen hadn't just been using my signal. She had somehow gained access to an unsecured smart camera feed from a neighbor's baby monitor. She had installed an old app that let her view multiple device streams over a shared connection. That's how she'd been gathering her HOA evidence. She wasn't just nosy. She was a suburban cyber peeping Tom. The breaking point came when I intercepted a message Karen sent in the HOA group chat. She claimed she had proof that I had been illegally monitoring the neighborhood, and that my work-from-home job was likely a cover for illegal data mining. She ended it by suggesting I should be investigated. At that moment, something clicked in my head. I wasn't just going to block her anymore. I was going to bring down her entire delusional empire, using every legal and technical tool at my disposal. I created a special honeypot Wi-Fi network titled Free HOA Wi-Fi. This network had just enough bandwidth to seem usable, but behind the scenes, I ran packet logging, file caching, and screen mirroring. Within 30 minutes, Karen's devices were connected. I watched in real time as she uploaded folders labeled HOA footage, neighbor notes, and violations. Each folder contained images, timestamps, and bizarre commentary. One red garage light was on past 10 p.m., possible drug activity. This wasn't HOA enforcement. This was cyberstalking. And now I had the evidence. I spent the next few hours compiling it into a 40-page document. Logs, screenshots, metadata, and matching MAC addresses. I layered it with a timeline of when each of her devices accessed my signal. I included the smart speaker voice logs. I even inserted a clip of her yelling at her cat because the Wi-Fi was down. By the time I printed the packet, stapled it, and slid it into a manila folder labeled, For Review, HOA and Legal, I knew this wasn't going to be a quiet neighborhood anymore. And I couldn't wait. The morning after I compiled my evidence, I drove to a local cafe to avoid even the possibility of Karen sniffing out my next moves through any digital cross-contamination. While sipping coffee in the farthest corner booth, I finalized the code for a more intricate trap, a high-level monitoring protocol disguised as a friendly, open Wi-Fi signal. I named it Neighborhood Freenet, a bland enough title to guarantee curiosity. The idea was simple: invite her in with honey, track her every move with barbed wire. Within the first hour of deployment, her devices reconnected on their own, confirming my suspicion that she had set them to auto-join anything resembling an open network. Once again, she was inside. But this time, I had firewalls and filters that would make any NSA analyst proud. I watched from my laptop as her traffic began flowing in. It wasn't just innocent browsing. She opened folders containing footage from neighbors' cameras, downloaded PDF scans of HOA bylaws annotated in her own handwriting, and even uploaded a list titled Violation Candidates. My stomach churned when I realized one of the names was a kid across the street whose only crime was forgetting to bring his trash bins in on time. She had taken screenshots of his backyard and highlighted them like they were crime scene photos. My honeypot recorded every keystroke, every click, every file name, and most importantly, every time she violated someone's privacy. I couldn't help but wonder how long this had been going on. Karen's obsession wasn't about rule enforcement or security, it was control. Her need to manage the neighborhood like a dystopian HOA dictatorship had pushed her to invade digital boundaries just as easily as she'd once trespassed physical ones. She was effectively running a suburban surveillance state with no oversight. And now I was the one watching her. Back at home, I organized all the footage she had collected from smart cams and home devices. Some of it was harmless, neighbors mowing lawns, kids riding bikes, but some of it crossed every imaginable line. A couple having a private moment in their hot tub. A man changing clothes in what he probably thought was the privacy of his bedroom, not realizing his open blinds and an old cloud-synced device left him exposed. I stared at the footage with mounting anger, imagining how those people would feel if they knew their privacy had been ripped away by someone who lived less than 50 feet from their front doors. I packaged it all into a separate encrypted archive, just in case I ever needed to turn the whole mess over to law enforcement. That moment was coming soon, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted her caught red-handed, not just accused. So I staged one final move. I inserted a fake file onto the decoy network, a clearly labeled document titled Pentagon Briefing Notes, Confidential. Inside, I wrote complete nonsense. Gibberish about space lasers, alien encryption, and fictional operatives named after random breakfast cereals. I included a fake timestamp, a fake clearance code, and a line at the bottom reading, "Do not distribute." Tracking enabled. Within 35 minutes, she downloaded it. And then she forwarded it. I watched her attach it to an email sent to a contact labeled HOA Legal Advisory. Now, in reality, this was just her cousin Bob, who had once taken a paralegal class online. But the fact that she forwarded what she believed was a Pentagon document without verification? That crossed a whole new legal line, attempted dissemination of fake classified materials. And I had it all on record. The next day, I filed a formal complaint to the actual HOA board, this time attaching a USB drive containing the redacted footage and logs. I didn't mention who I was or where I worked. I simply laid out the facts. Unauthorized use of my private network, invasive surveillance of residents, fabricated accusations shared in official group chats, and attempted impersonation of legal authority using falsified information. The board members scheduled an emergency closed-door meeting and invited me to attend anonymously to protect my identity. They had no idea the real reason behind my precision and organization. When the meeting started, Karen sat proudly at the head of the table as if she ran the entire community. She didn't even notice me sitting quietly at the far end, wearing a mask and a hoodie. One of the board members cleared their throat and said, "We've received troubling allegations involving network misuse and privacy violations. We'd like to review some material submitted by a concerned resident." They inserted the USB and played the first video. It was the clip of Karen's smart speaker announcing the warning message from my script. Her eyebrows raised, but she stayed silent. The second clip showed her phone screen mirroring footage from a neighbor's backyard, zoomed in on someone gardening shirtless. Whispers rippled across the room. Karen's eyes darted nervously. By the third clip, her laughing in a group chat while pointing out a neighbor's tacky patio chairs, captured by a hacked cam, the room fell silent. One board member looked physically ill. Karen stood up, flustered. This is doctored. Someone's trying to frame me. This is slander," she shouted. I could see the panic rising behind her forced composure. She hadn't realized yet that the clips were time-stamped, matched to network logs, and connected to her devices with verifiable MAC addresses. The president of the HOA spoke firmly. "Karen, do you deny accessing other residents' devices and internet connections?" Karen fumbled. I was just ensuring compliance. People break the rules all the time. Someone has to keep watch. And who authorized you to do that? I don't need permission. This neighborhood needs order. That's when I quietly handed the board member the final printout, her message from the HOA group chat, where she accused me of being a fake government employee running illegal surveillance from my home. The same message that had prompted a wellness check from local police, which wasted resources and nearly put my security clearance at risk. The moment that broke the camel's back. The board stared in stunned silence. Karen finally noticed me. Her face drained of color. She whispered, You did this?" I said nothing. I just leaned back and watched as her fantasy of control crumbled into fragments on that plastic HOA folding table. The board adjourned the meeting, suspending Karen from all HOA involvement pending a full investigation. As she stormed out, she hissed, "You have no idea who you're messing with." I raised an eyebrow, smiled slightly, and whispered under my breath, "Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." She didn't hear me. But soon, the entire internet would. The news spread faster than a brushfire in dry wind. Within 24 hours of the HOA meeting, someone had leaked snippets of the footage to a local neighborhood Facebook group. One clip in particular, a screen recording of Karen scrolling through baby monitor footage while sipping wine, went viral within the community. The video was accompanied by captions like, HOA or NSA? And Big Sister is watching you. Karen, who used to patrol the sidewalks like a self-appointed sheriff, suddenly became a recluse in her own fortress. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, she had thrived off inserting herself into others' lives, and now every eye in the neighborhood was on her for all the wrong reasons. I hadn't posted anything myself. I didn't need to. The evidence was speaking loud enough without my input. But what caught me off guard was how far the story traveled. A Reddit post titled, "Karen hacked my Wi-Fi and tried to report me for espionage. Didn't know I work for the Pentagon," exploded overnight. I hadn't written it, but I knew someone from that meeting had. The comments were merciless. Strangers from all over the world chimed in with their own HOA horror stories, and Karen quickly became the poster child for digital overreach and neighborhood tyranny. By the next morning, a local news station had picked up the story. Their segment blurred out names but showed enough footage to make it unmistakably about our neighborhood. Karen's porch, with its excessive cameras and HOA in progress sign, became an instant meme. The media dubbed her the surveillance suburbanite. When they tried to interview her, she slammed the door on their camera crew and shouted through the glass that she was being harassed by the deep state. The fallout was swift. Several neighbors filed formal complaints, citing emotional distress, unauthorized surveillance, and violations of digital privacy. One elderly couple threatened to sue the HOA if they didn't take immediate disciplinary action. Another neighbor, a single mom, admitted she had considered moving out because she felt unsafe knowing Karen had access to her smart baby monitor. Karen's self-righteous reign was unraveling in public, and no amount of denial could stop it. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet and watched the unraveling from my office window. I knew Karen well enough to expect some form of retaliation. She wasn't the type to go quietly. Sure enough, the very next day, I received a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer, at least not a real one. It was printed on low-quality paper and misspelled several legal terms. At the bottom, it was signed by legal advisor, HOA Special Consultant Bob. I smirked. Bob was her cousin, who once took an online course in contract law and now fancied himself a legal bulldog. The letter accused me of entrapment, slander, data tampering, and digital enticement, a term that doesn't even exist in any legal context. I added it to my collection of evidence and moved on. But I knew she wasn't done. Later that week, she attempted one last desperate move. I came home one evening to find a city code enforcement officer parked in front of my house. The man looked apologetic as he approached me. "Sir, I'm here because of a report filed against your residence," he said, claiming unauthorized surveillance infrastructure and signal jamming equipment. I let out a soft chuckle. Karen had just reported me to the city as if I were running some Black Ops intelligence facility out of my garage. I invited the officer in and showed him everything. My cleanly organized server racks, legal network equipment, and documentation of my Pentagon clearance. The moment he saw the setup and the stack of evidence I had on Karen, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Mind if I take a copy of this? We're getting more complaints about this woman than any other resident in the city." He left shortly after, clearly annoyed that his time had been wasted. I had no doubt that Karen was watching from her window the entire time. What she didn't know was that the officer had texted a few clips to his supervisor. I overheard him say, "You won't believe this HOA drama. Feels like a Netflix series." I couldn't have scripted it better. By the weekend, the HOA had sent out an official notice. Karen was suspended indefinitely from any and all HOA involvement, pending legal review. Furthermore, any unauthorized use of surveillance equipment, neighbor photography, or digital access of any kind would now be considered a breach of community code and would be referred to law enforcement. A new line was added to the digital policy. No resident shall employ unauthorized technological surveillance or intrusion into another's home system. The policy was co-authored by me, although they simply listed me as a consultant. I figured that would be the end of it, but then came the final twist. One of my old contacts from Federal Cybersecurity called me up on a Saturday morning. He had seen the Reddit post and laughed at the title. Then his voice got serious. "Jake, your home node flagged a couple of anomaly reports last month. Turns out, Karen's piggybacking actually triggered alerts in our civilian perimeter monitoring." I was stunned. "You mean to tell me her freeloading pinged the actual surveillance grid?" "Yup," he said. "It's not just neighborhood news anymore. Some agency eyes are going to want a copy of your logs. Not to interrogate you, don't worry, but to use it as a case study. It's rare we get real-world examples of suburban cyber intrusion on this level." I nodded slowly. I had set a trap to catch a nosy neighbor. Instead, I'd built a case study that might soon become part of federal training manuals. I prepared a secure flash drive, packed up the logs, and sent them through an encrypted channel. If nothing else, I had done my part in turning HLA hell into a national lesson on digital boundaries. A few days later, Karen made a last-ditch attempt at saving face. She went live on Facebook, sitting on her porch in front of a flag and several potted plants. Her tone was solemn. She claimed she had been misunderstood, that her efforts were only ever about protecting the community. She teared up mid-speech, blaming the media, the neighbors, and even technology itself. She never apologized. Instead, she said, I was trying to be the firewall between this community and chaos. Within minutes, the comments rolled in. One user wrote, "Lady, you were the virus." Another simply said, Karen.exe has crashed. Someone even clipped her saying firewall and auto-tuned it into a remix. The video was shared thousands of times within the day. Karen didn't leave her house for the rest of the week. Her cameras came down one by one. Her cousin Bob stopped replying to emails. The HOA printed a newsletter with updated rules and a message of appreciation to the unnamed tech professional who had helped redefine neighborhood safety in the digital age. I didn't need credit. The piece was enough. But just in case Karen ever tried to plug into another network that wasn't hers, I renamed my guest Wi-Fi to a very clear message. No free rides, especially you, Karen. By the time the fourth week rolled around, the neighborhood had changed in a way that felt almost cinematic. People smiled more. Kids played outside without their parents glancing nervously at Karen's cameras. Couples hosted barbecues again, doors stayed open longer, and for the first time in months, the street felt like a place people actually lived, not like some cold neighborhood under surveillance. Karen, meanwhile, had become a ghost. Her yard was overgrown, her blinds remained shut, and the once constant stream of anonymous violation tips had completely stopped. The same woman who used to walk the sidewalks like she owned them now barely cracked open her front door. Still, I wasn't letting my guard down. If working in cybersecurity had taught me anything, it was that threats don't vanish. They just go quiet until they find another way in. So I kept monitoring. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew someone like Karen didn't disappear. She regrouped. She schemed. And as expected, she tried one last move, but this time, it backfired harder than she could have imagined. It started with a new Wi-Fi signal popping up on my network scan. The name was hilariously obvious. @justice_revenge. Amateurish. Sloppy. And exactly her style. I let it sit for a few days, collecting data. The network was open, but its hidden payload was designed to spread a localized worm, one that could crash unsecured devices and upload junk malware files onto nearby systems. The goal, clearly, was to flood or slow me down. The files themselves were laughably bad. One was a looping slideshow of fake legal threats with animated clip-art hammers smashing computers. Another played a text-to-speech voice repeating, "You will regret what you did to Karen." I sat in my home office staring at the screen and actually laughed out loud. The mistake Karen made this time was thinking she was the only one who could play dirty. She had no idea that I'd already set up a mirrored network called Decoy_Hub, running a real-time sandbox environment that fed every malicious packet into an analysis protocol. I watched her worm self-destruct in less than 3 minutes, traced the exact device broadcasting it, and then redirected the payload to a loopback that displayed only one thing on her end. A message in bold red text reading, "I see you." The signal vanished within seconds. A moment later, I got an alert from one of my physical cameras. Karen had tripped the motion sensor on my driveway, frozen in place, staring at my house like it had grown eyes. Then she turned and sprinted back to her front porch like she'd seen a ghost. The next day, I received a message. Not a digital one, but a hand-delivered note in my mailbox. No envelope. Just a single piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "Enough. You win. I surrender. Don't escalate." I folded it neatly, slid it into my archive folder, and shook my head. It wasn't about winning. It was about stopping someone who thought she could do anything without consequence. The fact that she finally saw the line was something, but I wasn't about to drop my vigilance. Her note meant she'd realized the game was over, but I doubted she grasped the full weight of what had just happened. Later that week, I got a formal request from my Pentagon contact. They wanted me to present what they now called the Karen Protocol, their nickname for my digital counter-surveillance logs, to a closed-door session of military cybersecurity analysts. Apparently, my neighborhood incident was being used as an unexpected but powerful case study on how civilian tech misuse could trigger security escalation. I wasn't flattered. I was unsettled. Because if someone like Karen could trigger military-level alerts with nothing but a laptop, an attitude, and too much free time, what could a real threat actor accomplish? I put together my slides carefully, included screenshots, timestamps, and even Karen's original speech-to-text transcript that triggered the final spiral. It was surreal. One moment I was arguing over bandwidth in a cul-de-sac, and now I was standing in front of high-ranking analysts showing them how one suburban busybody got too close to a real digital defense line. After the presentation, one of the directors approached me, clearly amused. "You sure you're not just a very elaborate prankster?" he asked. "I wish," I said. This was 100% real. She had no clue who she was messing with. "People never do," he nodded. "But this? This is gold. Not just for protocol training. For cultural training. We're adding this to the civilian awareness module." I left that session with mixed feelings. On one hand, it was satisfying knowing that Karen's antics were now part of something bigger than her ego trip. On the other, it was alarming that it had taken this level of escalation to prove how dangerous digital carelessness can be. Back home, I started reinforcing my own defenses. Upgraded encryption, dual-layered routers, and even a rotating IP range, just in case someone else got curious. Meanwhile, Karen had become the punchline of every local conversation. Someone taped a cardboard sign to her lawn gnome that read "Big Brother's Little Sister." A neighbor down the street painted a Wi-Fi symbol crossed out on their fence and labeled it Karen Free Zone. Teenagers started walking by her house while loudly playing parody songs. One of them even created a remix titled "Hacked by Karen," using auto-tuned clips from her apology video. It got more views than her original livestream. Despite the ridicule, I noticed something strange. Karen began unplugging things. Her doorbell camera disappeared. Her lawn sign came down. Her blinds stayed open longer. And then came the biggest surprise of all: she installed a physical mailbox. For the first time in years, she stopped using digital notices for HOA alert. She reverted to paper. It was as if she'd sworn off technology entirely. It would have been almost pitiful if it weren't so ironic. The woman who once weaponized smart tech against the entire street had been reduced to handwritten notes and analog silence. It wasn't exactly justice in the traditional sense, but it was poetic. The real victory wasn't in embarrassing her, it was in finally restoring peace to the people who had lived under her paranoia for years. On a quiet Sunday, as I walked past her house, she stepped out to collect her mail. We locked eyes for the first time in weeks. She didn't speak. Neither did I. She gave a brief nod, not out of friendliness, but acknowledgement. She knew it was over. That whatever war she thought she was waging had ended. Not with fireworks, not with a courtroom, but with code, exposure, and consequences. As I turned the corner and walked home, I couldn't help but smile. There were no sirens. No lawsuit. Just silence. The kind of silence you only get when someone like Karen finally runs out of batteries and bandwidth. A month after everything unraveled, the neighborhood had taken on a new kind of rhythm, one that pulsed with quiet relief. There were no more anonymous emails about fence colors or overgrown hedges. No bizarre flyers about unauthorized flower bed. The oppressive presence of Karen's scrutiny had evaporated, leaving behind fresh air and a subtle kind of gratitude. You could feel it during early morning walks, where neighbors actually waved instead of stiffly nodding and checking over their shoulders. There was a sense that we'd collectively passed through something absurd, tech-infused, and faintly ridiculous, but real all the same. It hadn't just been a drama between neighbors. It had been a digital war for privacy, and in a world where everyone had grown used to being watched, it had struck a nerve. I didn't say much to anyone. I kept my head down, stayed polite, and when someone mentioned the Wi-Fi situation with a smirk or a quiet chuckle, I nodded and let the conversation drift. I wasn't after attention. I had a job to do, not just for the Pentagon but for myself. So I turned inward and got to work on something I'd put off for years. A complete transformation of my home into a personal cybersecurity fortress. I called it the rebuild. It started with hardware. I gutted my office and replaced it with commercial-grade network cabinets, redundant systems, and a biometric-locked server rack. The routers were now custom-flashed with real-time traffic monitors that updated every 5 seconds. My firewall wasn't just software. It was physical, layered, and backed by a self-written AI that could detect intrusions and reroute attacks into isolated fake networks. Every device in my home was assigned its own digital signature. My lights, thermostat, even my refrigerator had clearance levels. I didn't just secure the house. I locked it down like a forward operating base. But the real upgrade came from the software I wrote. I designed a civilian-friendly version of the honeypot that had trapped Karen, simplified, streamlined, and disguised as a free network diagnostic tool. I called it Sentinel Lite. After finalizing the build, I offered it to a few friends in the neighborhood who had asked for advice on how to prevent another Karen incident. The feedback was immediate. They loved it. It was easy to use, clear, and helped them see what devices were connected to their homes. Within a week, over a dozen houses on the block were running Sentinel Lite. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had tried to turn the neighborhood into a surveillance zone. Now I'd helped everyone else build a defense grid to keep people like her out. Karen herself had gone radio silent. She wasn't posting, patrolling, or even peeking out her blinds. For all I knew, she'd gone completely analog. Occasionally I'd spot her tending to her garden, always quick and purposeful, never lingering. Some people might have felt sorry for her. Not me. I wasn't vindictive, but I had no illusion that she had learned anything beyond how it felt to be caught. The humility she showed was thin, reactive, and temporary. Like a computer with a fresh reinstall, still dangerous without the right antivirus in place. Just when I thought the story had settled into its final phase, a letter arrived in my mailbox. This time it wasn't handwritten or passive-aggressive. It was typed, formal, and carried a seal I knew well. It was from my own agency. The subject line read, "Request for authorization, a civilian cybersecurity briefing initiative." I opened it slowly, scanning the body of the text. It asked for permission to use my entire Karen incident as a scenario in their training program. Not just the logs and tools, but the entire narrative. From the Wi-Fi hijacking to the digital sting, to the neighborhood consequences. They wanted me to speak at their upcoming seminar as a guest strategist, not under classified detail, but as a public case model. I read it twice and set it down, suddenly realizing what had happened. What began as a stolen network connection had become a national model for civilian defense in suburban tech warfare. They weren't just asking for my story. They were asking for a movement, a shift, a rethinking of what digital safety really meant when everyone had a dozen connected devices but no clue who was listening. I said yes. The presentation happened 3 weeks later. A large auditorium, rows of analysts, engineers, and civilian leaders. I walked them through the events just like I'd lived them, balancing the absurdity with the seriousness it deserved. They laughed in all the right places, especially when I showed the screenshot of Karen's Wi-Fi name, Karen_Godmode, and sat stone-faced when I played audio from her group chats sharing baby monitor feeds like neighborhood gossip. When it was done, they applauded. Not just because I'd outsmarted someone, but because it reminded them that threats didn't always come wearing ski masks and typing code in a dark room. Sometimes they wore yoga pants and patrolled the block with a clipboard. When I got back home, something strange had happened. There was a small gift basket on my doorstep. No name. Just a card with the words, "Thanks for giving us our neighborhood back." Inside were cookies, a bottle of sparkling cider, and a printed photo of a router with sunglasses drawn on it. I laughed harder than I had in months. And then, as I stood there smiling like an idiot, my phone buzzed. A notification from my security app. A new device had attempted to connect to my home network. I blinked, opened the app, and saw the name of the device. Karen's_last_hope. The MAC address was new, but the timing was perfect. Almost like she wanted me to know she hadn't entirely given up. I paused for a moment, then tapped a button that quarantined the device into a decoy trap that looped endlessly between fake login pages. It would seem real, but never go anywhere. Just an infinite hallway of fake doors, wasting her time until she gave up. I didn't block her. I didn't retaliate. I just left her spinning, lost in the very digital maze she used to weaponize. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't humiliation. It's patience. It's knowing you've built something too strong for people like her to break again. And as I stepped back inside, doors locking behind me with a soft hum, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. It wasn't about Karen anymore. It never really was. She was just the symptom, the spark, the story. What really mattered was what came after. The systems we build, the trust we reinforce, and the quiet, unstoppable way we take back control. And from that day forward, no one ever touched my Wi-Fi again.